Welcome back to episode 65 of the Grappling Growth podcast with me, Joe Testori. On today's episode, I was joined by Robert Heath Sr. He is the president of the Legacy Leadership Consulting Group, and he is a former US Marine. This man is one of remarkable integrity. He came on today's show and he left no stone unturned. He showed extreme vulnerability and transparency and discusses how he has become the man he is today and how he's consistently evolving to become a better individual for himself, his family, his community, his team, and society in general. I took so much from this podcast, and I know for a fact you will too. Enjoy. As entrepreneurs, we all experience challenges in our business journey. I'm Joe Testori, and the Grappling Growth podcast is my attempt at documenting my entrepreneurial journey while building my brands. I sit down with fellow entrepreneurs, understanding how they grapple with growth. I hope you find value and enjoy. Robert, pleasure to have you on today.
Pleasure to be here, brother.
Robert, I'm super curious, given your background being in the US Marine Corp. What does growth look like to you?
All right. I love it. Growth to me is a goal that we strive for every day, and it's being better today than I was yesterday.
How would you look to quantify that?
Yeah. So a lot of times, and I grew up, and I don't know if any of your listeners have had this experience, but right, I call myself a recovering perfectionist, right? There was no such thing as good enough. There was no such thing as, right? All I could see is what I didn't do as I was growing up. And for me, that became really unhealthy. And one of the things that I learned in the Marine Corps was there's a difference between excellence and perfection, right? Excellence is that striving, is that growth, is that understanding that I can always be better, where it's a positive driving feeling rather than kind of perfectionism, which is a negative, debilitating feeling. And so when you're looking at, for me, I learned in my journey being a teacher and then also in the Marine Corps, right? I can always choose, do I look at somebody that's ahead of me? Do I look at somebody that's behind me? And depending on which one I choose, that's how I'm going to feel for the day. If I look at somebody that's ahead of me, then I can feel like I'm not doing enough, like I'm not good enough, like I'm never going to make it. Like it's never going to happen. Similarly, I can make myself feel amazing by looking at somebody that's behind me, right? They're not as fast as I am. I'm the golden boy. I'm doing amazing. But the reality is, the people that are ahead of you, the people that are behind you, that's a snapshot in time. You have no idea how they got ahead of you, whether they started ahead of you, whether they started behind you, whether they're dealing with something. But the one person that you can always compare yourself to is you compare yourself to you. And so what I always try to do is look at myself and look at what I'm accomplishing, how hard I'm going, how focused I am, how disciplined I am. And I look at me yesterday and I look at me today and I ask myself, am I doing what I can do to improve? Am I doing what I can do to be better? Am I doing what I can do to grow? And if the answer to that is yes, then I'm content with myself. If the answer to that is no, then I'm doing something. I'm changing, I'm moving, I'm growing.
As we know, comparison is the thief of joy. And as you mentioned there, I think that there's a lot to be said about growth is quite hidden and it's intangible. We know that if we go to the gym 5 days a week, that maybe our numbers don't increase day by day, but it's when you stretch out that time horizon and you give yourself, I had a fantastic podcast just before this, but talking about feminine energy. And I think there's this mindset amongst a lot of young men of this perfectionism, but all gas, no brakes. It's everything needs to be there 24/7. When you
realize the hustle hard mentality,
it's destructive. So you mentioned about you calling yourself a recovering perfectionist. Did you think at the time when you started going into this recovery, so to speak, and what illuminated it for you? Because I think at times, especially myself as a young man, I'm a bit too critical, I think.
Yeah. The thing for me was being successful and not being fulfilled. Right. So the moment that I distinctly remember, I'm in the Marine Corps. I'm a company commander at this time. I am right. And I've been promoted to company commander. I've been given command. Everything on the outside looks amazing. And my wife taps me on the shoulder and she says, hey, I didn't get married to be a single parent. And the interesting thing about that for me was everything was going well. But she looked at me and she said, like, you're not deployed. You're not in Afghanistan. You're not in Iraq. Like, your office is 2.5 miles from our front door. But I see you less now than I saw you when you were defense counsel. I see you less now than I saw you in a lot of other things that we do in our lives. And even though it's great, but you're not present. And even when you're home, you're not really here. And it was so difficult for me hearing that because I had been striving for professional success, to be the best that I could be, to take care of my family, to take care of my country, to take care of my Marines. And in that moment, I realized that if I'm not fulfilled personally as well as professionally, then it's not success. On the outside, it looks great. On the outside, it looks like everything is going great. But the problem is I was still struggling. I was still suffering. And I didn't even know it. And so then I started looking at, how can I get more done with my time? How can I make sure that when I'm home, I'm being what my family needs me to be? How can I make sure that when I'm at work, I'm being what I need to be at work? When I'm in the community, I'm being what I need to be in the community. And a lot of people talk about this thing called work-life balance. And I want to say to you and to your listeners, like, I firmly believe that work-life balance is a fool's errand. Like, it does not exist. Right. And the reason it doesn't exist is because you're not a different person, right? Like, you can't be at work and at home and over here. And this whole idea of being able to balance it, disintegrated in a disintegrated nature, right? It keeps all the parts of you separate and it leaves you lacking. Instead, I like to talk about what's called work-life harmony, right? It's where you integrate all of the parts of you so that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, right? If you ever listen to music, you hear one note, you hear another note, you hear another note, and they sound nice. But when you hear them together, there's something more that's there, especially when they're in harmony with one another. When they're in harmony with one another, there's a resonance that happens. There's a vibration, there's an energy, there's a hum that exists in that music that is more than just the individual notes, but it's comes from the blending and the synergy of those notes together. And that's what our lives should be. And so when you asked me about kind of my perfectionism journey, it was when I realized that what I was doing and that striving for perfection was not working. And so then I went on a journey trying to figure out, how can I master my time? How can I maximize my fulfillment, not just my external success?
Wow. So this is a somewhat selfish question, but I think it's one that I think a lot of young men can take. I think a lot of young men would be asking as well. I'm 30 years old. I feel at times I don't have a great balance, great harmony of my life.
Yeah.
What would you, I'm not asking for roadmap, but if you could give me a better guidance on how you think I could maybe reevaluate stuff, what would you suggest to someone who feels they've gone through this and you've got way more life experience than I do?
It's a great question, brother. And it's where we get, right? We kind of get to this place, and a lot of people in your circumstance, I was a little bit older than you when this question hit me, right? And what happens is we spend so much of our time trying to figure out, what can we do? And we get to this point where we're like, we can grind, we can push, we can do, right? I was a Marine Corp officer. I'd gone to a top law school. I've been a litigator. I've been a company commander. I've run a marathon, right? I've done all these types of things. What can I do? But then there's another question that we get to, which is the what should I do question. And that's the one that we haven't spent a lot of time learning how to decide and how to decipher. And so the one thing that I would say is, you have to look for alignment. Right? If you ever driven a car that's out of alignment, you know how much of a harrowing journey that can be. It's just all over the road, right? It feels like it's about to shake apart, right? And all it is that the tires are not in alignment with each other. It's not that they're not working properly, that they're not functioning or any of that. But that lack of alignment can create this really catastrophic experience. And so the question, to answer your question, what can you do? The first thing you have to be able to do in order to get into alignment is you have to know where you're going. You have to define success. And so many times when we look at success, we get our definitions of success from external sources. We're going after what we think we should be going after. We're going after what we've been told by society we should go after. We're going after what looks good in the magazines, what looks good on YouTube or on Instagram or on Facebook. But we haven't really done the deep work of defining success for ourselves. And until we can get clear on two things, what does success look like? But more importantly, what is our purpose? Why are we here? Why am I on this planet? What is the reason that I am waking up every day and having breath in my lungs? Once you can figure out what that purpose is, now you can make sure that everything that you're doing is marching towards that purpose. And once you get into alignment, it changes things dramatically.
And this instance with your wife, when she just hit you with this home truth and essentially put the mirror up to you and had you
Mm-hmm.
face reality, how old were you when this happened?
So I was 35 at the time.
And from there, how did you take that step back to really reflect and figure out what you wanted, what made sense for you, your goals?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. It took me some soul searching to do it, and it was interesting because it was the second time that I had to do this. The first time was much harder, and I remember. So I was in law school. This was about 4 years earlier, almost 5 years earlier, and I'm there, and I had gone to law school, and a little bit of my background. I graduated high school. I was 16, went to college, and I was one of those rebellious people that was like, everybody has told me all my life that grades are what determine that you're smart. But obviously I was smart. I skipped a grade. I graduated early. I didn't need to get good grades. And then I got to college and I got an A on my first paper. And everybody had said that college was really hard. And then I got an A on my first paper. And I was like, no, it's not. So I'm going to show you all how smart I am. I'm going to get good enough grades to graduate without going to class. And so, 5 years later, I did wind up getting 2 degrees and a minor and a 2.4 GPA, right? I come out of college and I realized that I don't really like what it feels like to not know that I'm at the top of the class. Like I felt like I was normal again. And this was like, oh, I don't like this feeling. And so now I'm trying to figure out how to do things. And I go to graduate school. I wind up getting better grades and learning how to study and do great. But I hadn't proven to myself yet that I could actually do well in school. I knew I was smart, but I didn't know if I was a good student, if I was a good enough student. So I go to law school, and I'm at the time, Illinois was ranked 23rd in the country as far as a law school. And so I felt like I had gotten into a good law school. And now if I can be top 10% of the class or whatever, then I will have proven that I am capable. And I'm a semester in, I'm spending 40, 50 hours a week in the library. I wake up, my daughter is asleep. I go to school, I come home, my daughter is asleep. And I started thinking about like, if I do 3 years of this, how am I going to look back on my law school experience? What's going to be beneficial for me? And in that moment, I had to have this kind of soul searching moment where I realized, right, I was already in the Marine Corps and I was on a law contract. So all I had to do was graduate law school and pass the bar, and the Marine Corps was happy. So I didn't need to do great in law school to get a good job. So then I looked at it and I was like, well, I need to get good grades in law school so that when I get out of the Marine Corps, I can get a good job. And the reality is I was going to be in the Marine Corps for the next 5 years. Nobody's going to be looking 5 years from now at what your GPA was. They're going to be looking at what you've done with your degree in the last 5 years. So I didn't need good grades to get a good job after the Marine Corps. And so I'm sitting there and I'm trying to figure out like, what's the reason for me to get good grades? And the only reason that I still had left to get good grades was because of my personal ego. And I had to then ask myself, is it worth me missing my daughter's life from 2 to 5 to satisfy my ego? And I had to come to the understanding that it wasn't worth it, right? Even though it would prove to me that I was able to be in the top group of people and all the rest of those types of things, was that worth it for me? Would I have ended my law school career feeling like that 3 years had been worth it? And the answer I came back with was no. So, I go through and I'm like, well, I can't just not do anything because I've done that before. I did that in undergrad. No, just getting by, just graduating, that's not good enough either. So I had to figure out what success looked like for me for law school. And when I did the math, there were a couple of things that I hadn't done yet in my academic career, right? I hadn't made the dean's list because when I was in graduate school, they didn't have a dean's list. They didn't have graduating with honors for our program, right? So even though I graduated with 3.8 GPA, we didn't have any of that. So I had never made the dean's list and I had never graduated with honors. I was like, that's what I'm going to do in law school. But I'm also going to see my daughter. I'm going to take her to the park. I'm going to have fun with my wife. I'm going to enjoy my time. I'm going to be part of organizations. I'm going to experience law school and demonstrate to myself that I can do these things that I had never done before in my academic career. And so fast forward 3 years, and I had been an editor on a law journal and a staff writer on a law journal. I had been a president of an organization. I had gotten my golf handicap down to almost single digits. Right. I've played with my daughter and taken her to recitals and to all the things. I didn't miss anything. She got to hang out at the law school and see some legal luminaries speak and hang out, and everybody loved her and all the rest of that. I got to have a phenomenally rich experience. And, oh, by the way, I've made Dean's List. And, oh, by the way, I graduated with honors. And I look back with fondness on my law school career. So I had done that once in that kind of narrow space, but I didn't understand that that was the kind of prescription for life at the time. So, of course, I fell back into the perfectionist, professional grind, right? But this time it was different. This time I knew that it couldn't just be this job. I had to change something because I had to fix what was broken. I couldn't have my wife feeling like we didn't have the family life that we needed to have. I couldn't have my kids feeling like I wasn't there. And so this time when she said that, what she said, and I looked at it, I looked at the fact that my prescription for doing better was to work harder. It was to spend longer hours. It was to be the doer. It was to grind it out. As a matter of fact, becoming a Marine and then living as, as a Marine Corps officer just reinforced for me, right? Because that was part of what I did, because it was the hardest one. It was the service where it was difficult. And so I knew I had to do something different. I read a couple books. One book that I highly recommend to everybody that's thinking about this, that's kind of grown up under the hustle hard mantra, right? The grind, hustle and grind mantra, is a book by Tim Ferriss called 4 Hour Work Week.
Of course.
It was a mind-blowing experience for me as I looked at someone who was articulating efficiency, not laziness. And he was advocating efficiency as a means to get more done. Not as a means to do less, but to do more by doing less. And from there, a couple other books that I read, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, I've read a number of times, and I reread it during that period of time. How to Win Friends and Influence People, another book that I looked at.
I'm reading that again for the second time right now.
Yeah, there you go, right? And ultimately, what I learned during that period of time was I had to become a better leader, and I had to get a lot better at mastering my time so that I could be present wherever I was.
Powerful. I think it's something that, again, if I just talk from my perspective, and that's sort of why I wanted to start this podcast a couple of years ago, is I wanted to, I wanted to be able to give something to the young version of me. Younger people who message me and they say, because that's the big thing amongst 18, 20, 25-year-olds, they're lost. And I know I was lost a few years ago. And I wouldn't say I'm lost now, but I'm discovering. I feel like I've got my path, and I feel aligned to my mission and my purpose. And I feel content with that.
Yeah.
It's a case of listening to this. It's I don't have many words to say because I've got a lot of things that I'm thinking about right now. With everything you've said, and you can't go back in time, none of us can go back in time. What advice would you give to Robert Jr., let's just say?
It's so funny that you say that. I think about that often. Often. And I actually do have a son named Robert Jr., so this is definitely appropriate.
I know,
so,
that's why.
So this will be great. I think the biggest thing, and a couple of things, right? I teach this with a lot of my clients. I actually wrote a book about this journey, and it's called Thriving in Chaos, right?
Say that again?
Thriving in Chaos.
Okay.
Right. And what I did is I actually packaged the steps that I took into 5 steps for mastering your time. And so the things that I tell people all the time, first of all, is to understand that there's a difference between mastering your time and managing your time. What most people do is they manage their time. And by manage their time, what I mean is they manage their time around other people's priorities, responsibilities, wishes, and desires. And what that does is it always makes you feel like you're on the outside looking in, because your inbox will never be empty. As a matter of fact, the better you get at managing your time, the more requests, the more inquiries, the more demands upon your time will come from people. And if you don't learn how to master your time, AKA, if you don't learn how to set boundaries and enforce boundaries around your time, how to say no so that you can really say yes, right? Then what you wind up feeling is this constant overwhelm and this constant sense of fatigue that happens. And it's not a question of if you're going to burn out, it's a question of when, right? And so the thing that I would tell my younger self, the thing that I tell my son, the thing that I would put in my book is you got to learn 5 key steps. Step number 1, you got to learn to define success, like we talked about. Mm-hmm. You've got to figure out what your purpose is and what success looks like to you. And the thing that you have to realize is that you're not really skilled at this. Even though every one of us thinks that we're really good and we know what we want, most people don't. Here's what you know. You know what you don't want. Most people are great at telling you what they don't want. You ever had this experience before? Somebody's like, man, I'm hungry. You're like, yeah, I'm hungry too. What you want to get to eat? They're like, I don't know. You pick.
I don't want
right?
Mexican. I don't want.
Yeah, right. And they're like, I don't know. You pick. And so then you're like, cool. Let's go get a burger. I'm like, nah, I'm not really in the mood for burgers right now. Okay, don't worry about burger. All right, well, let's get some seafood. We'll go get seafood. That'll work. Let's get some sushi. Well, nah, I had sushi earlier this week. I'm not really sure. And they go through this whole process, right? But remember, they started out, they didn't know what they wanted. They just knew that they were hungry. But everything you bring them isn't what they want, because most people are really good at articulating what they don't want, but they're really bad at being clear on what they want. So the first thing I would tell everybody is learn how to figure out what you want and get out of the land of the don't wants. Because here's the funny thing. When you know what you want, it makes your life easier, because there's one thing that you want, whereas there's 10 million things that you don't. And just the process of having to sift through all the things that you don't want steals your time. Whereas when you're crystal clear on where you're going, on the direction that you're trying to get to, the destination that you're trying to, or that you're trying to achieve, right? And arrive at, when you're able to do that, it transforms your decision-making capabilities, because all the things that aren't the thing that you want don't distract you anymore. Right? It's like when you go into the store. If you know you're going to get milk, you walk past everything else. You go get milk. You go to the cash register. You get gone. Right? When you're just going shopping and you don't really know what you want, you go down every aisle. You can spend an hour in the store. Most people are walking through life shopping instead of going to get what they need from the store.
You said something that is in line with what I'm living by this year. So every year I come up with a word of the year. Mm-hmm. And this year I was very clear on what I wanted it to be. I did a real big, as I mentioned, I'm in Latin America right now. So I had a lot of time by myself, especially in the downtime just before and after Christmas. I had time by myself. So I was writing out, and I looked and examined and studied the year I had. And equally, as you said, I looked at the things I was happy about, and then equally things I wasn't so happy about. And the word of the year that I write this down in my journal every day, and I've been a bit slack, if I do say admittedly, but I tell myself this word every single day, and it's intent. And in my journal, I write, be intentional. And over every page where I look at it, it has that, and it has the number one goal that I have, and I've got a page at the back with all of my goals. But be intentional. And are you familiar with Naval Ravikant?
I've heard that name before.
I'll send you a link to a really good podcast that he was on before. But there's a book that's written about him. So it's got an amalgamation of his tweets and just any piece of literature he's put out online. So it's not written by him. It's called The Almanac of Naval Ravikant. It is my top 5 favorite books ever read and written. Okay. And I reread it again about 2 months ago. But essentially, he's a he's a philanthropist, an entrepreneur. He's the founder of AngelList, so help people essentially VC back their companies,
Yep.
and somewhat a modern day philosopher.
Mm-hmm.
But he spoke about what you said. He said he doesn't schedule anything in his diary, and naturally, these are champagne problems. When you're if you're working at McDonald's and you want an opportunity, you're not going to turn around and say no. There's stages and levels at life where you just have to say
Mm-hmm.
yes or accept anything, can eat
Yep.
those crap sandwiches. But
Yep.
he's got to the point now where he can say no to pretty much any and everything. And I was notoriously bad. I would say yes to everything, or I feel the urge to have to say no, I'm not interested to people. Or if I say no, I'm not interested, then I would have to explain myself. And I just left it there because
Mm-hmm.
I can only make X amount of decisions in one day. And if I know that for me, I want to focus and practice one sport, jiu-jitsu for me, but then
Mm-hmm.
someone saying to me, oh, well, why don't we play basketball together? Or why don't you try hockey? And it's not being ignorant, but
Yeah.
I know the route that I want to go down. So
Exactly.
if at this stage of my life, this is what I want to focus on, and I don't want to pull myself in these different directions to try things. Yeah, sure. There's times in my
Mm-hmm.
life when I do want to experiment and try, but
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
want to be super intentional. And there's another book I want to bring to your attention. It's called 10x is easier than 2x.
2X. Yep. Right there over my shoulder.
Okay, I can see the 10, but I couldn't work out if it was.
Yep. That's it. I love it. Yeah, it's behind this book, but yeah, 10X is easier than 2X.
Yeah, there
It's
we
one of
go.
my favorite books, brother. Yes.
I promise you, I wasn't able to see that. I could just see the 10, but I think that book that just helped me become more. It removed it put the blinkers on, because I think a lot of the times we look at things and we just they say if you try to catch two rabbits, you catch none. It's just a case of just
Exactly.
focusing at the one thing you want, getting disciplined. And I always think the
Mm-hmm.
most successful people I know and I've leaned into are the people who, as you said, Tim Ferriss, they get
Yeah.
efficient. They don't look at things of, oh, we're going to look at all these things at the same time. I'm curious, what are a few other books that you have on your shelf there?
Yeah. So a couple of them are, this is the book that I was just telling you, Thriving in Chaos. So
Uh-huh.
that's the book that I wrote. Up above my head there, you see Who Not How. That's another one um, from Dan Sullivan and Dr. Benjamin Hardy. And then over here on this side, those are a couple of other books that I wrote, Courageous Communication. And then the first book that I ever wrote, which was for leaders specifically, was focused on, and the title of it is Why Can't People Just Do Their Jobs? Right? Because so many people struggle and deal with that. But I think in this conversation about getting the most out of our time and being able to really focus our time and master our time. There's something that you talked about that I think is so powerful, right? When you look at being able to focus, the real reason that so many people struggle with focusing is not because they can't figure out what they want. After you figure out what you want, even there's another problem that you run into. And you kind of alluded to it. You talked about it, right? Saying no. And most of us feel like we have to be this mean ogre person. Like you said, you would say no, but then you felt like you had to explain yourself. And here's where that comes from, right? And it's not a bad thing. It's actually a sign that you're a good person, right? It's a sign that you care about other people, because you realize that when you say no, you're actually taking something away from somebody, right? When you say no, if they're asking you for something, you're literally saying, no, I'm not going to give that to you. Right. And so one of the things that I talked about, and you notice I talked about setting and enforcing boundaries. There's a difference between saying no to somebody and getting somebody to say no to themselves. Right. And part of the thing that I'd like to teach people is, although people aren't entitled to your time, you should be grateful that they want it.
Very true.
Right. And we have to remember that we've cultivated this reality. We have grown ourselves into the get it done people, right? We are the people that if somebody needs something done, they're going to call us. If people are calling us and asking us to do stuff, it's because we have a reputation. We have an expectation that people have of us that we're going to get it done. We are the go-to person. And here's the reality. That's what we want it to be. we intentionally cultivated that reality. So now it's not okay for us to now be upset that people want us to be the go-to person when we've cultivated that our entire lives. So how do we balance that? How do we harmonize that? How do we integrate that with this understanding that I have a purpose? And like you were talking about with jujitsu, I want to do jujitsu. And see, the key thing about it is instead of telling people no, which is a very abrupt and a break in the relationship, what I like to teach my clients how to do is instead of telling people no, you want to enlist them into helping you figure out a win-win scenario, right? Because the real reason that I'm telling you no is, like Gary Keller said in his book, The One Thing. That's another book that I highly recommend for everybody that's struggling with this to read. But one of the things that he says in that book, he says, in order to say yes to anything, by the very nature of saying yes to something, you have to say no to everything else. Mm-hmm. But if I can have the communication and the conversation with you about what I'm saying yes to, you don't make me have to say no because you understand what I'm already saying yes to. When you let somebody know, hey, I've got to be at my jiu-jitsu school at 4 p.m., they don't come to you and say, hey, can you take me to the mall at 4:30? Right? And the reason why is because they're aware that you already have something to do. That doesn't change the fact that they need to go to the mall, but it does mean that they know that they're not going to ask you to take them. But now you can be available to help them problem solve how they're going to get to the mall at 4:30 because you're there and present for that. They just don't ask you for the thing that you can't do. But in order to do that, we have to first know what our priorities are, right? Defining success. We've got to align our priorities so that we can break it down. So we're not trying to do everything at once and making our mission overwhelm us. Step 2, aligning and your priorities and your goals. Step 3, we got to schedule them. They got to get on our diary. We got to make sure that we understand what we're doing every day so that our priorities are there, so that when it's decision-making time, we don't say yes because we think we have nothing to do and then forget and then remember. And then lastly, you have to be able to protect that time. You have to be able to set boundaries and enforce boundaries. And the way that you do that is you alert people, you notify people, you let them know where your no's already are by telling them what your yeses are. And then when they come and they ask you for something, you enlist them into the battle of figuring out how to get that thing done. I'll tell you a story back when I was a defense counsel in the Marine Corps. Now at this time I had gotten to be the winningest defense counsel in our office. Right. I had more acquittals than anybody ever in our office had. And I had a bunch of cases, but all the young attorneys would love to come and talk to me and figure out how to be better attorneys. But I didn't have time to deal with them because I'm in court. I'm working on cases. I'm doing all the rest of this type of stuff. But I can't be upset that they're trying to ask me stuff about jurisprudence because, right, I've earned that reputation, right? Like your shirt says, earn, not given, right? Like they were coming to me for a reason. But I also had to deal with the fact that I didn't have time to deal with them because I had to take care of my clients. How do I balance both? And the whole key is I had to think about it not from the perspective of either they win or I win, which is a very binary perspective. I like to call it, right? Jim Collins coined this phrase, the tyranny of the or, right? Instead, I like to deal with the bliss of the both and. How can we both get what we want? How can we find a synergistic solution? How can we find a transcendent solution that allows you to get what you want, allows me to get what I want, and us both to walk away from this happy? Right. And I talk about that a lot more in my book, Courageous Communication. Right. How can you have influence with people and develop win-win scenarios, even in the most difficult conversations that you need to have? And the key thing is remembering that a win-win scenario means you win too. Right. So often we get into this space where we become what I like to call resentful martyrs, where we just give of ourselves and lay down our time for the greater good. But then after a while, we get tired of people asking us, because when am I going to be able to come first? When are people going to recognize that I'm tired? When are people going to recognize that I'm doing all this? And the reality is they're going to recognize when you start helping them know that that's what's going on. When you start communicating, when you start actually bringing them into what's going on. because they can't read your mind. They don't know that you're busy. They don't know that you got jujitsu at 4:00 unless you tell them. And a lot of people, what happens is when you get into that space and somebody asks you for something and you're like, no, I can't do that. I got something else that's in that space. That's the moment where we feel like it's either them or us. Instead of being able to say, hey, I've got jujitsu at 4, so I'm not going to be able to take you there. What are some other options that you have available for you? Because here's the thing that I learned when those lawyers were coming to my office and coming to my desk. Yes, they wanted to spend some time with me, but they were comfortable not spending time with me if they got their question answered. And so what I figured out how to do was to say, hey, what's your question? What are you trying to do? Oh, got it. So Joe's not in court, and Joe is a great person to ask that question to. Let me check real quick. Hey, Joe, you got a couple of seconds? Perfect. Can you talk to Sally about this question that she has? Because she's got court next week. All right, awesome. So Joe's waiting for you to come to his office to talk to him. You go talk to him, get that, and then I've got some time next week after you get finished with your trial and everything. If you want to debrief with me or talk about that, we can do it. Sound good? Amazingly, 2 things would happen. Number 1, I didn't have to be distracted from what I needed to do. So I got to get what I wanted. They got the answer they were looking for. So they got to get what they wanted. We both walked away happy from that encounter, and their thought and their relationship with me and their appreciation for me went through the roof. Even though I said, I'm not the one that can help you solve this.
It's like the Tim Ferriss framework, DEA, delegate, eliminate, automate. And I think
that part.
That's the big thing when you're in these positions where our time is finite. We cannot do everything that's set on our plate, and at times, and this is why strong businesses have processes. There's ways of operating, and this is why we have fantastic people like Cara and your team who can set up these conversations, because for you, you've delegated the thing, and as you said, you're not in charge of your calendar, and I'm sure that you're not in charge of your household as well when it comes down to certain things. And when you sit down and you're deciding where to eat with your wife, it's more of a case of, come on, honey, we need to decide where we're going to eat today. And it's,
Exactly.
I don't want to have this, and I don't want to have Chinese, and I don't want to have barbecue. So it's these elements, and I think it's something that I'm really trying to learn myself, where you want to be the servant leader to everyone in your team and your clients, and you'd love to be in 3 different places at once, but hey, guess what? That's not going to be conducive to you nor I, and it's also, if you want to evolve, and first question I asked you, what does growth look like to you? It's, for me, it's very similar to you, marginally improving day by day, and a lot of these results aren't things you can see, but it's me sticking to my non-negotiables, and if I can't adhere to my non-negotiables today, if I can't respect my own accountability and the things I set for myself, how can I respect it when you put this in front of me and you say, hey, well, I need this done? Well, I'm going to be transparent and forthright as possible right now to say to you, I'm sorry, you don't like this answer, but no.
Yeah, no, and again, the way that you can do it, right, for so many people out there, because it takes a lot of. Here's what I learned, right? It's hard to be disciplined and focused because you want to help people. You want to take care of people. And when you have to look at it and say focus is over here and taking care of people is over here, most people will choose to take care of people instead of stay focused. And so the whole point of thriving in chaos is that why are we making them like they're mutually exclusive? Mm-hmm. It's the genius and the bliss of the both and. How about I stay focused and take care of people? Right? And there's one other step that we talk about in the book, which is the 5th step. And this is hacking habit. You see, because everything that we just talked about it's a lift, right? Thinking about what you want, thinking about, aligning it and putting it together. And if every day you got to do that same lift, there's no way that you would be able to do this day in and day in and day in and day in and day out and get it done. But the beauty of the way that the brain works is this: 40 to 50% of the decisions that we make in a day are automatic. They're habitual. Mm-hmm. We don't actually have to think about them, right? To give you an example of a couple of decisions that you don't even think about that you do. When you wake up in the morning, do you decide what hand you brush your teeth with, or does it just happen?
Same as tying your laces, same as how you pour your coffee, how
Exactly,
you cook
right?
your fun.
It's a habit. You don't even have to think about it. As a matter of fact, there are things, and habits can be very complex. For example, have you ever been on your way home from work, you're driving home, and you remember you like, oh, I got to go to the store, I got to grab something. So you got the plan, you're going to grab something from the store on your way home. But then you get in the car, you start driving, and you're getting ready to make that turn where you got to go home or you go to the store, but you're on the phone talking to somebody, and you wind up in your driveway.
Mm-hmm.
Even though you knew you were supposed to be at the store, how did you get home? How did that happen? You had made the decision that you were going to the store, but you got home. That's because driving home is a habit.
Mm-hmm.
The beauty of everything that we're talking about and these decisions that we're learning to make is that you can make them habitual. And when you can make your success habits, the decisions that you're making habitually, what begins to happen is that it begins to be harder and harder to not be successful and easier to be successful because your brain is wired to go one way. And that's where it gets easier and easier to figure out how to create win-win scenarios. It gets easier and easier to figure out how to not have to tell people no, but to enlist them to say no to themselves. Because if they realize that in order for both of you to win, they've got to go a different way, then they're willing to go a different way because you're presenting a way for them to win. Instead of when it feels like one of you is going to win and one of you is going to lose, then they may pick themselves. But oftentimes, if you give them a way to win where you can win also, they'll choose that one all day, every day.
It really leans into economic principles of positive sum games versus zero sum games. And quite
That's
often
it.
we see things as a win or lose scenario when in reality it's a more complex problem or solution as to what we think, and it's about figuring out how we can get to said end outcome where it's not okay, we've got this cake here. It's not a case of you have to have all of it. It's, well, and actually, if you had all of it, you'd probably feel really rotten and sick. And also,
Mm-hmm.
that kind of that mental anguish of the greed there as well for knowing you've taken that whole cake, as opposed to actually
Mm-hmm.
splitting it. It feels way nicer to know that your neighbour's got electricity and you've got electricity on at the same time because, well,
Right.
you've got happier neighbours as well, which is so important.
Yeah.
I'm curious. After you.
I was going to say just the beauty of that too. And this is where the synergistic thinking comes in, where 1 + 1 = 1,000.
Uh-huh.
We can go bake another cake. Even if eating the whole cake is the thing that you want to do, great. How do we figure out how to share this cake so that everybody gets some and we go bake another cake so that you get the equivalent of a full cake?
Mm-hmm.
Because you thought that all we had was this one cake, but we've got so much more because there's abundance when we can put minds together, because our creativity, our ingenuity can create things that did not exist before to exist today.
Massively. I was going to ask, looking at the Legacy Leadership Consulting Group, I saw that you've experienced a tremendous 20% year-on-year growth, banked over $1 million in revenue, and I can see that you're the interim CEO, and your accolades speak for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
With the business growth, where do you see things going in the next 12 or so months?
Yeah, in the next 12 months, one of the things that we're really kind of focusing in on is how can we expand our impact, especially at the individual level. So I've done a lot over the last 7 years of helping companies, right, from Fortune 500 all the way down to startups. But one of the things that warms my heart the most is when I can help individuals, like you said, the young people that are trying to figure it out, the business owner, the small business owner who's got, just one employee or two employees, or maybe it's just themselves, they're a solopreneur. And we're really trying to figure out how to expand our reach to be able to help those demographics. And a story that sparks this, I had one of my clients, one of my coaching clients, who bought Thriving in Chaos, and then she went and did it, and she would talk to me about it, and check in with me, and she was like, "Coach, it's so amazing, like I'm doing what's in the book." And before she started reading the book, she ran a small business, and she would be out at work. She had a trash hauling business. So she would work in, different neighborhoods and with different developers and everything. And she would haul trash out of the buildings. If they're doing demo, if they're doing cleanup, whatever, she would haul the trash and take care of everything. And she had a number of different clients So she was doing well in business, but she also had 3 little kids at home. And so she wouldn't get home till 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night, every night. And so as she looked at it, it was like, as her business got better, her lifestyle got worse. Right. And we took her through the book. She went through the different stages and figured out what success looked like. She defined it. She worked on it. And one of the things that she loved was the fact, and I love this quote from her. She was like, I didn't realize that it could be easier. Over about a 4-month period, she was able to not only start reducing her hours so that she was at home with her kids at 6 p.m. every evening, but she doubled her revenue and she tripled her profitability in the same time span. And those are the types of stories that I'm really excited about. Those are the types of stories that I want to see more of. And so one of the things that we've done is we've created a program called Defining Success that we've now, kind of released, and we're letting people get involved with, where we help people to create a blueprint, what we call a success blueprint, where you get really in touch with what is your actual purpose? Why are you here? What does success look like for you? What does success look like for you in your life? What does it look like for you 10 years from now, 3 years from now, 1 year from now? So that you can have that alignment that we talk about. And then we also take them through and teach them how to use tools to greatly condense their time in planning, so you can actually develop a plan a lot faster. And this is one of the things that I'm really excited about. So my goal to answer your question is that over the next year, we'll have over 100 people to go through that program, and we'll have a bunch of success stories and be able to touch a ton of entrepreneurs.
There's a word in Portuguese, but it's mainly reference to jiu-jitsu, which is alavanca.
Alavanca, yeah.
There you go. Leverage.
Yes,
And
sir.
it's the big thing with jiu-jitsu. It's you're quite often using the other person's energy and momentum to form leverage,
Leverage,
and
yep.
it's how you bring that into your business. And again, quoting Naval Ravikant, he talks about the new modern era for leverage, and he details it as a pyramid. So you've got
Mm-hmm.
human capital at the bottom, which is it was quite typically the most common form of leverage. You have person A to do task B, and then you get them
Mm-hmm.
there, and then you've got. Let me just get this right. You've got leverage capital. So then having money work for you, and then you've got content, so distribution like this. We use this as leverage. We have podcasts like this, and we cut up 10 odd clips, and it goes out to 5 to 10,000 people or such.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got code, which is probably the most scalable piece of leverage. It's when you get a piece of technology and it's able to amplify the messaging, and that's why the most profitable, valuable companies in the world right now are tech and media companies in the
Yes.
world. And it's looking at how you engineer that leverage more and more. And I think that's what's so exciting about the space that we're in with artificial intelligence. And
Mm-hmm.
it's giving you the platform to serve more clients. It's probably before where if you had the exact same business you're running right now, if
Mm-hmm.
Robert wanted to work with these clients, maybe you'd probably be capped at 10 clients. But
Yeah.
with where we're at now, you can 10x where we're in as a position, and you're able to serve. And I think you're probably doing yourself a disservice with having the goal of 100 clients.
Mm-hmm.
I imagine that we'll speak in that time in a bit 500, maybe 1,000 clients, because you've got such a
Yeah.
journey, mission, and message there that you're there to share with people and help people there. And you've got that leverage now with what you're doing. So that's very exciting.
Oh, definitely. You're 100% right. And to be clear, the 100 is step one. Phase 2 is definitely to exponentially leverage. The big thing that I want to be able to do in this phase and through the rest of the year is to really create an intimate experience, so that then we can duplicate and replicate and leverage that experience. Something that I'm really excited about that you just talked about when we talked about AI agents have the opportunity to leverage not only code, but also the equivalent of people's time, because you actually have the code that's able to do the thing, and then it's also able to review the thing, and then it's also able to change the prompts there's a there's a there's a step or a stage of entrepreneurship that is about to be different than anything that we've seen up until this point. Because oftentimes what's necessary in, if you got AI workflows or you have different scenarios, there isn't the discernment to look at the finished product and say, this isn't good enough. How do we fix it? That's normally where you need people's time. But with AI agents, we're going to quickly, in the next 5 to 10 years, be aware, be on the lookout, because what we're going to be able to do is be able to teach an AI agent how to review something properly and how to iterate it so that all of the testing and all of the iterations are happening without human intervention. And that is going to exponentially increase our ability to innovate, our ability to create, our ability to maximize our time. I'm so excited about the future. But the first piece, before you can use the tools, you got to learn how to master your time so that now the tools just make that skill that you have better and better. Like you said, leverage. Without power, there is no leverage, right? You have to be able to push the lever. Now that power gets exponentially increased with the longer the lever. As Archimedes famously said, you give me a lever long enough and a place to stand and I can move the whole world.
And on to the piece of AI, that's where these language learning models come into place. And we know with AI, it's only as good as the commands that you give it. And with there's tons of workflows and tools out there, but being able to, again, harmonize and synergize them together where they can find the root cause of a problem and they can see, okay, we're not just going to do what you tell us to do. Once you've got it engineered properly and you've got that, let's just think about a Ford factory 100 years ago. It's if you have all of those mechanisms and conveyor belts in place, and all you literally need to do is get a human just to go like that, eventually they'll figure a way to do it themselves. And then that way you can have the factory running 24/7 and it's just efficient, streamlined, and then it's allowing us as humans to further enhance our capabilities, our learnings, our development into better areas to then build better systems. And we spoke before, and it was pretty much the same conversation as the podcast previous to this, which was fantastic. And I'm sure our guest was called Nicole Parker Beggs, an amazing, fascinating, smart lady. But looking at that, we spoke about farming, the innovation of farming 100 years ago. It used to take 50 farm workers to pull potatoes out the ground. A tractor came along and did the job in probably a third of the time and actually better.
Exactly. And what's funny about it, right? There's a lot of fear in the world that, oh my God, well, what are humans going to do? And the crazy thing that I always laugh about when I hear that is, right, it's as if we're not going to have anything to do. But the reality is we have the faculty of creativity.
Mm-hmm.
We can figure out how to create better and better systems and to do more and more things. It's not as if when tractors came along, people just don't have jobs anymore. People are working more in construction, in the finance industry, in computer graphics and computer, right, in aerospace, in marine biology, right? There's so many fields that exist today that didn't exist then because everybody was working on a farm. Now, right? And so we were able to release that labor and put it to better uses because we didn't need it to be extracting things from the ground. And that's the reason why we've been able to put a person on the moon. That's the reason why we've had rovers go to Mars. That's the reason why we're able to explore the Marianas Trench and all the different things that we're able to do around the world. That's the reason why we know when tornadoes come now, instead of we're just hoping and praying that it doesn't happen where we are, right? All of these things have happened because of human ingenuity and our ability to leverage our time to get more done with less effort.
Massively so. Robert, it's been a pleasure. What's the last thing you'd like to leave our listeners to think about?
I would love everybody to just, as you go throughout your day, remember to live every day like it's on purpose. I'm a firm believer that everybody has a purpose, everybody has a gift, everybody has greatness within them. And that every day that you wake up is a reminder that there's a reason for you to be here today. And so I would like to tell everybody to live every day like it's on purpose and in alignment with your purpose, because you were destined for greatness.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure, my brother.
Wow. Wow, thank you, sir. That was
You're welcome.
that was a humbling experience.
Was it what we wanted? Was that what did we give what you were looking for?
And more, I must say. There's probably been about 5 to 10 of these podcasts where if I feel I just need to take some time just to reflect, and it's. Have you thought about running your own podcast?
So the answer is yes. So I used to run a legacy leadership podcast a little while back. The thing that I don't like is the production. So I'm working on trying to figure out, we've got a podcast that we're thinking about doing called the Legacy Builder Podcast. And ultimately what we want to do is have stories like this where people are talking about their journey and their growth and how they built something. But we're also going to be talking about the hard parts, the things that I talked to you about today, like when I got tapped on my shoulder, when it didn't feel great, when to really give people more comfort in understanding that this journey is a lot more, that the struggle is a lot more normal. It's not that you're doing something wrong. Mm-hmm. It's that you're actually moving in the right direction. And this is par for the course. Mm-hmm. But so the answer to your question is yes, I've thought about it. I've got to get all the stuff in place to have somebody produce it, because that is not my strong suit. That is not where I need to be spending my time. That's the delegate spot.
Well, funnily enough, and this is, again, the lady who spoke to you earlier, she's in the exact same position as you. She's releasing a podcast in September, and it is a minefield. And this is something that we're trialing as an actual service. So if you'd be open to, we can schedule a call for next week or the week after to sit down and discuss the actual podcast delivery, because there's a few facets. It's a case of, A, you want to be able to get guests on autopilot. B, it's the idea for you is you're a key person of influence. Your time is valuable, that you want to turn up to the podcast and the rest is taken care of. And then it's, okay, here's our production cadence. We've got podcasts coming out this date, this date, this date. And we've done this now for ourselves for 2 years. And it's actually been a case of a friend of mine came to me and said, hey, how do I do this? And we mapped it out with him. And you can search his podcast, Triangle Theory. It's a pretty popular podcast now. And he's doing everything in person and well. So if you're open to it, we can hop on the call and brainstorm.
Yeah, I would love to definitely explore that. Like I said, I'm looking at that process and what it would look like and costing, because our goal would be to launch something probably Q4, Q1, as far as a podcast is concerned. And so I would love to discuss that. Let's do this. Reach out to us so that Kara can get it on the calendar, and then we'll make that happen for our next call.
Amazing. This podcast will be out in 4 weeks, I believe. We've had a load of shoots over the last few days. But when it comes out, we'll be tagging you on socials, all the platforms, anything relevant. I've got a link to your book. What I'll do, just to save time, I'll send Cara a message and say, hey, what links would you like me to include on the podcast? Typically, we just do your social medias, your website, but I think you've got books out there. If there's any specific links you want us to send to, then we'll do that, and I'll send you.
Yeah, we can definitely do that, and then we'll probably be doing some sort of giveaway or something like that, so we'll be able to put that there as well.
Amazing, Robert. Honestly, thank you, and it's been so humbling. So I've learned tons from you, and I'm sure
it is a pleasure, and your thirst and your hunger, like, keep doing what you're doing, man, because you're well ahead of the curve. Right? I wish I could have been at where you are when I was 30.
Well, honestly, that means a lot to come from you. So that's very strong. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, brother. It's a pleasure.